Welcome to the Empowered Mothers Network podcast, supporting mothers to be the best version of themselves. I'm Sarah and this is episode 30 of the EMM podcast. This episode is called When Women Gather, the Hidden Power of Circles in Our Time. So in this episode today, we're going to be looking at women's circles, why they are so needed at the moment, as well as what actually practically goes on and happens in one if you've never been to one before, and why they're so powerful as well. So if you're watching this podcast episode or listening to it, you're probably already familiar with the concept of women's circles. They are really gaining in popularity now, I think, and for good reason, because we really need them. But I know this is something that still to a lot of people, they probably know a bit about women's circles or have an idea of what it is intellectually, for example, but maybe don't know quite enough about them to feel confident enough to go into one. I think a lot of mums as well, obviously as well as the time constraints and the busyness we have, is that it can feel quite intimidating if you've never been to a women's circle before. It can feel quite intimidating to know what to expect, if it's something that's of any use to you, because a lot of the benefits that we're going to talk about in the podcast today are actually really deep benefits, but they're not necessarily benefits that we can measure on this scale that we have in society, to like a scale of productivity and output and concrete outcomes. It's very difficult when you are doing something that's in such a feminine energy to try and put that into an output kind of related measuring system of it, if that makes sense. It's a bit like, if you like to paint and you paint for enjoyment, and you're tallying up at the end of the month, how many paintings have I produced in this time? Was that an efficient use of my time? It's that kind of mentality. So we're going to talk a little bit more about, what to expect at a women's circle, although we can't cover all of that because each one is so unique and it just unfolds as it unfolds in its own time, and it depends on the dynamics of the people you've got in the room. But a bit of an idea of what you can expect, if you're kind of interested in looking at women's circles, maybe you felt that pull that you want to sort of move and go to one, but you're not quite sure what's going to go on. You feel a little bit maybe intimidated or vulnerable about it. So we're going to discuss all that today in this episode of the podcast. And before I jump into all these bits here, there is a little thought that I have that I wanted to share at the beginning of the podcast, which is, what if the key to healing, empowerment and deep connection, which are often things we all crave right now, lies simply in coming together in a circle? I just feel we are searching for it too much externally. Obviously, external stuff is useful to give us more information and to help us find the decisions in ourselves, but there's a certain point where we're just consuming information for gaining information and we're not embodying it. And I think that is something that women's circles can really help us do. There's no script, there's no set way of doing things, and sometimes we overlook this in society as well. Sometimes the most simplest on the surface, the most simplest things can produce the greatest results and the biggest shifts, because we're just tuning out all the shite and coming back to ourselves. And women's circles give us a really good safe container to help us come back to ourselves. So let's dive a little bit deeper in what happens in a women's circle. So as I just said, a typical circle, you can't necessarily linearly in order you can't necessarily in order describe what a circle will look like regardless of where you go, who you're with, because it can be such a fluid thing and change. But generally a women's circle will have a little bit of a loose structure to it, so that, I think you need a little bit of a loose structure for things, because then that's the container that's holding you all. If you don't have any structure at all, then there's no container holding you. You're going to kind of pick up on those vibes. You're not going to feel quite necessarily safe in yourself and your own body as you would have done. And then that's where, people will tend to hold back a bit more. Things won't get shared. Things won't get expressed as much. And then the benefits aren't as good. So whilst we don't want to follow like a really strict structure, in terms of being in a circle, it helps to have a little bit of structure, just so we know what to expect, and which parts of the evening we can feel a bit more safer to kind of feel a bit more vulnerable and open up. So most circles will have like some kind of opening ritual, and that can often look like some kind of grounding practice, so like a meditation, a short meditation, intention setting, breath work, something like that, just so that, when you come into the room, you've come in from whatever your life has been up until that point in the day, busy things going on, your mind's probably full, a few of you might want to be coming in chatting, so it's just getting that going, moving from that sort of more left-brained field of everyday life into the more right-brain field of being in space in a circle and just settling down in that space. So there's usually some kind of opening ritual there, just to get everybody grounded down in their own body and kind of in the zone. Beyond that, there's usually a point for sharing and listening, so taking turns to share like personal stories, things that have gone right for you, maybe things that have gone wrong for you that you need to talk about with the group. And there's also, beyond you, the person who is sharing, is also equally important, is the people who are there listening. So there's an emphasis really on and cultivating deep active listening, so that's a really useful skill as well that you can get just by going to a women's circle, is this idea of really, as each person takes their turn, really sitting and actively listening to them. Because I think so much now, when people have problems in the modern world and they share them with us, I think we have two. Well, the main reaction we often have is that we're kind of anticipating what the other person's going to say, and then we're trying to sort of jump in and interject before they've maybe finished sharing as well. And this is stuff, I'm not just preaching this is stuff I catch myself doing as well, and I have to practice. And there's also this need, and I've always come from like a problem solving background, so I find this one really difficult, but when someone's sharing a problem with you, to be able to just hold that space for them and actively listen, rather than jumping in and trying to give them a solution to that, if they're sharing a problem, rather than jumping in and trying to give them the solution, or have you thought of trying this, have you tried this, why don't you do this, kind of advice where you're trying to solve the problem. And that is really difficult, because we're all so full of creativity and ideas, and especially if it's somebody we care about the outcome of their problem, we don't want them to be having a problem. We just naturally want to jump in there and solve the problem. So that is a really challenging one, but it's something that's really helping you then in circle develop this skill of deep listening, which is a really useful skill, especially when it comes to like motherhood as well. If we can transfer that kind of skill of deep listening to our own children, because so many times we are just in this place of being busy and flustered, and it's like the kids come to you with something and it's like, I'm listening but I'm not really listening, so, and they pick up on that, so women's circles for deep active listening, that's a really good place to practice it, and then you can practice it in future with your kids as well. Some circles, not all circles, but some circles will also have guided activities as well. So that could be something like a guided visualization or journaling. A lot of circles will have like journaling. A lot of circles will also have some kind of really simple, gentle movement, like a bit like yoga, or kind of somatic movements. Gentle movement that will help unlock the emotions. So that's a big one. Is, when you come into circle, if you're talking about problems or what else, sharing your deep fears, emotions, things like that are coming up to the surface, it can then be really useful to move into the next part of the circle, and just as those emotions are coming to the surface, kind of find helpful and healing ways of getting them out and expressing them. So that's why often you'll find that circles have these kind of ways of, expressive arts, as if you will, so like painting or journaling or yoga, because that it's not just because it's like, let's break time, let's draw a picture. It's more used to kind of them emotions that are coming up to the surface to really process and help get them out. Because again, a book I've recommended in the EMN journal that I've been reading is The Body Keeps the Score, and that is talking about the effects of trauma and how it is held in the physical body. So, things like this, like gentle movement and journaling and expressive art, are really actually more than just kind of indulging your creativity. They can be real ways to express yourself and work on healing things. And often circles will have like a closing ceremony as well, so that could look like a group affirmation, or just lighting a candle and somebody saying a few words, but some kind of closing ritual to close down the space that's been held for the evening, and allow everybody to get some kind of closure for the evening, and then move back into the realms of daily life. So overall, the atmosphere of a women's circle should feel non-judgmental, supportive and confidential, and that is, as a facilitator, one of the jobs of the facilitator is to keep the atmosphere and keep the vibe of the circle in that space, which is why I'm going to go for some training, because it's quite an important role, and if you don't have that atmosphere in the circle, then the whole thing just is not going to be beneficial for people. You are putting women in a circle. It can be very powerful healing wise, but it can also, if it's the wrong space and it's the wrong atmosphere, it can equally then turn into something that isn't if you're already opening up and being vulnerable, you don't want to be in a space where you feel like you've been hit one for opening up and being vulnerable. So it's very important that those non-judgmental and confidential and supportive spaces are maintained and upheld for the duration of any circle. So this is very intentional that this is the deal, because this is the sort of atmosphere that we need, really, as women now, to open up and to share our stories, because it's so hard in everyday life. Opening up and feeling fear maybe and feeling vulnerability actually can become a strength, and that's when you can come out of these groups feeling like, wow, something is I really needed to say that, and now the simple act of me sitting with these people listening to what I've had to say, I feel tons better. It can actually facilitate so much healing, and it's such a simple thing. So you can have so much like emotional healing and connection in a circle, and the idea is that you're coming together with maybe like-minded people, maybe not. You don't have to be in a circle with people who are all into the same stuff as you, or even all at the same stage as life as you, but you're all kind of there for this same core reason when you drill right down to the core of it. And being in a circle where you feel safe, and you should always feel safe in a circle space. You know, if you don't, your intuition is telling you you don't feel safe, then there's literally no point in you being there. It's if it's not a safe space for you, because that won't be somewhere that you can feel that you can open up. So if you're in a safe space in a circle, and you're sharing things that could be, you know, traumatic or emotionally triggering, but if you're in that safe place, you can really sort of validate your personal experience, which reduces, you know, the feelings of feeling alone and feeling isolated. A lot of us deal with things, you know, in private that we don't talk about in public every day. As I mentioned, we don't all share our hearts on our sleeve, and we can feel quite isolated and alone and feel like, you know, if something's happening to us, we're the only person it's really happening to, when actually the truth might be that it's not happening exactly in that same situation for everybody, but there's more people than you think moving through a similar thing. So circle is essentially giving us healing in the form of two really powerful things, which is being in a safe space to emotionally release, and validating our personal experiences and that feeling of being heard, validating our reality. So those two things are really powerful in terms of our own healing path. Now, what a lot of women worry about when they're going to women's circles is, how much do I need to share? So you might be quite a private person, where, you know, you're not either used to sharing a lot, or you don't feel like you really, you know, want to share a lot. You might be moving through something and think, well, it's a difficult situation, but I don't really want to talk about it in a room full of women I either don't know very well, which can be intimidating, but equally if you do know them. So, you know, we have circles in rural communities, for example. A lot of rural communities, you will know the other people there either very well or as acquaintances, most likely. A lot of them you'll probably know as you know them to speak to. And there's a lot of dynamics as well in villages and small towns like I live in, where everybody knows everybody, and you get that kind of stereotype of everybody knowing everyone's business and into everyone's business, and that can put a lot of people off, I think, going into circle, because it's like that feeling of, well, you know, if I'm really opening up and sharing a lot with people who kind of half know me, is all my information and all my personal life going to be spread around the town type thing? So that is definitely something that, again, needs to be addressed by whoever's facilitating the circle, especially in these, you know, in rural communities where you do know each other quite well, is emphasising that this space is confidential. And as a person worried about sharing, that's perfectly, you know, valid fear that we have to protect ourselves. So it may be that you start going to circles and don't share a lot, or if anything, barely, for a while. But you may find that, you know, by going to circle, you will naturally find that some people want to and need to share stuff more than other people. Some people will just naturally be more held back. Some people will naturally more want to tell you everything. And there's no right or wrongs, which is a great thing. So what can be really useful in circle is when you've got the people who are really open and wanting to share and talk, just by them doing that and you witnessing like that courage and wisdom that they are taking to do that, you'll often find that the other women in the group kind of rediscover their inner strength, as it will, and you'll find that if somebody kind of is the person to open up and share and just get really vulnerable, rather than people judging that person and saying, oh, I better, you know, I'll tell such and such about that, you'll find that it's more geared towards the other women in the group just naturally opening up a bit more about themselves and about what they need to share and what they need to be listened to about, if that makes sense. Something that we can get in circle that we cannot get so easily out of circle is collective wisdom and support. Of course, you can get that online for a pretty penny if you so need it, but it's probably a lot easier and cheaper to sit in circle. And especially if you've got people with different backgrounds, different ages, you're getting, if you so want practical advice, you can ask for that, and people may come to you with ideas if you're open to that, and also, if you've got a challenge, then different ways of looking at it, different perspectives. So there's that balance between, sharing and listening and just having that container to offload. But at the same time, if you're feeling vulnerable and you have an issue, it may be that sharing it's enough, or it may be that you would like to request a little bit of collective wisdom on that, and a bit more of the groups kind of coming together and thinking of something creative to deal with a particular situation. And of course, where you're being in such a vulnerable space, and hopefully safe space, is that you will come to meet other people, even if you kind of knew of them before, you might not know them so well, or people you've never met before. And so being in circle with these other women can really extend support and friendships beyond just the container of the circle. So these are some of the benefits that are kind of not necessarily inherently obvious of joining a circle. Probably a few more that are often overlooked are that the aspect to improve mental clarity and reduce stress when you're going through kind of a mindful practice in a group. Also, I think women's circles are really beneficial for being a place where you can really enhance your intuition, and that can come about through hearing different perspectives, different experiences, just getting a general feel as well for the vibe of the group. If you're feeling like it's not a good fit for you, your intuition will be telling you that. Whereas if you feel, really, this is a place I need to be, this is a place that's going to really benefit me in terms of healing, even if I can't mentally articulate it, that's where you're developing your intuition. And a sense of belonging as well, which I think a lot of us are looking for at the moment. We can feel really, really isolated now, especially a lot of us are looking for advice online and Googling things constantly. And it's just having that supportive community, even if some circles are online based, you're still coming together with physical people, even if it's not in a physical space together. Okay, I've waffled on for a bit now, but what we need to talk about to end off the podcast is why we need women's circles now more than ever. Because the world is falling to bits, essentially. The pace of modern life is insane, and as I've just mentioned, social isolation, and I don't know about you, but I'm just sick of the fact that I constantly, if I'm bored or I have a quiet moment or I need to sit down, then I'm either over to the phone or either to the laptop and open it up. What am I doing? What am I going on? Why am I going on this? I'm on devices too much. My kids are on devices too much. Oh God, your connection with a real human being. So yeah, there's again, as I say, there's good points to things online. We can find advice, we can find communities, but we're feeling disconnected and overwhelmed, and we need this kind of circle space to really bring us back to our roots, I think. This authentic in-person connection, and collective healing as well. Now, I'm also studying basics of shamanism at the moment, and something that is integral to that is this concept of the great forgetting, which isn't for this podcast because I've waffled on enough. But essentially, we have forgotten, we have lost a lot of our own cultural traditions and ancestral traditions. Our ancestors would have sat in circles, as opposed to triangles. Our ancestors would have sat in circle. These are ancient, ancient practices of wisdom and community support. These are very old ways, and they're coming back, and they do need to come back. They won't look exactly the same as they did, because our world, our lives, our existence doesn't. But we need these ways back. We need to reclaim these old ways, definitely. Reclaim these kind of traditions in a modern context, because we need the healing from them now more than ever. And a big point is, we look at the way the world is right now, the way that power has been abused, the way everything is forced, the way everything is so left-brained and masculine. And, it's kind of this strength mentality, barge on, plough on, fight on. And nobody really thinks in our society, we can make real good change and actually facilitate real healing just by all being vulnerable together. Vulnerability is seen society-wise as such a weakness. It's like, you're not supposed to be vulnerable. You're supposed to be hard. You're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to put a front on it. Do you know what I mean? And suddenly then we're gathering together in circle and actually encouraging each other to be vulnerable, which is the antithesis of what society is telling us. But then how's society going, right? Not well. So they can be very grounding. There can be a ripple effect from them as well, where it ripples out into, each individual woman that goes to circle ripples out then into her family, because that will ripple out to her partner, her children, other friends perhaps that aren't in circle, communities. It's the ripple effect, okay? So these can be really powerful tools for healing, personal transformation, collective transformation, in a way that we can't tangibly say as well. It's hard to, if you're doing like a sales page on your website for doing a women's circle, it's hard to say, I'm going to give you X, Y, and Z, and from that you're going to get A, B, and C results. It doesn't quite work like that. Again, that's the kind of left brain masculine thing. So, yeah, I think we really need to take women's circles seriously as well, and how powerful they can actually be, and how many benefits they have that we don't necessarily think about, and how we urgently need more and more of them. So I would encourage you, if you are watching or listening this, maybe you've got an interest in women's circles, then go and check one out locally to you. If there is not one locally, you might feel the call to set one up yourself. There are, you don't need formal training to do so. For me personally, I'm finding that just having some formal training would be really useful, because I would really like to get clear on holding a safe space for people. And some of those sort of skills come naturally to people in everyday life, and some of them it doesn't come necessarily naturally to me. It's something I've learned in my day-to-day life, and I probably would need a bit more support with that. But if you feel the call to set one up, then definitely look into that, and also reflect on what a supportive community means to you, and how potentially you could benefit with gathering with like-minded women. Some ways you might not know yet, some ways you might have an idea about intuitively. So I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. If you have been to a women's circle before, or if you facilitate your own circles, or you have that experience, let me know in the comments what your experience of circles has been, good and bad. I know some people will have good experiences. Some people may not have such good experiences, depending on, the container of the circle, dynamics and things like that. But I'd love to know your experiences, and also, you know, if this long idea I've had of EMM mother circles, if that's something we can do in the future. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Please subscribe and like if you haven't already. You're welcome to join the network by subscribing to the fortnightly EMN journal, and you can do that on the website or via Facebook and Instagram pages. But otherwise, I will wrap this podcast up and see you in a fortnight.